Admiral Choi Yuna sat in her command chair, staring at the endless stars beyond the main viewport of Earth Defense Station Alpha. 15 years had passed since she lost the horizon's edge, and she still felt the weight of that failure every single day. 200 brave souls had vanished into the darkness of space, and she had been the one to give them the green light for their mission. The deep space exploration vessel had been humanity's pride. Captain Lee Do-yun and his crew were supposed to establish the first human colony beyond the outer rim. They had the best equipment, the smartest scientists, and enough supplies to last decades. But somewhere near the Kepler 442 system, they simply disappeared. No distress signal, no debris field, no trace at all. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Commander Park from the communications station. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Deep Space Monitor 7. Yuna turned in her chair. Monitor 7 was positioned at the very edge of the solar system, watching for incoming threats or returning ships. Nothing interesting ever came from that direction. "Put it through," she said. The main screen flickered to life, showing the tired face of Commander Roberts at the monitoring station. His expression was strange, somewhere between excitement and pure confusion. "Admiral, you need to see this," Roberts said. "We're detecting a large vessel approaching from outside the system. The energy signature is off the charts." Yuna frowned. "Unknown alien vessel?" "No, ma'am, that's the problem. The ship is broadcasting Earth identification codes. Codes that haven't been used in 15 years. The blood drained from Yuna's face. "Specify." "It's the horizon's edge, Admiral. Captain Lee Do-yun is requesting permission to dock at Earth Defense Station Alpha." The command center fell completely silent. Every officer turned to stare at the main screen. Yuna felt her heart racing as she tried to process what she had just heard. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Run a full scan. Check those identification codes again." "Already done, Admiral. 3 times. The ship matches the horizon's edge in size and basic configuration, but there's something very wrong with the readings. The hull composition doesn't match our records, and the energy output is 20 times higher than it should be." Yuna stood up slowly. "How long until they reach us?" 6 hours, ma'am." She turned to face her command staff. Every face showed the same mix of hope and fear that she felt in her own chest. The horizon's edge had been gone for 15 years. Everyone aboard had been declared dead. Memorial services had been held. Families had grieved and moved on. "Contact Dr. Song Hyun-woo at the Science Institute," Yuna ordered. "Tell him to get here immediately and send word to Earth Command. They need to know about this." "What should I tell them, Admiral?" Yuna looked back at the screen showing the approaching vessel data. The numbers made no sense. The ship was there, real and solid, but it was displaying technology readings that should have been impossible. Tell them the dead have come home. 6 hours later, Yuna stood in the main docking bay with Dr. Song Hyun-woo and a full security team. Through the transparent, aluminum windows, she could see the horizon's edge approaching. The ship looked exactly as she remembered, but something was definitely wrong. The hull gleamed with a strange, silvery metal that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. Energy patterns danced across the surface in colors that hurt to look at directly. The ship moved with a smoothness that no human vessel should possess, sliding through space as if the laws of physics barely applied to it. "The energy readings are incredible," Dr. Song muttered, checking his instruments. "Whatever power source they're using, it's beyond anything we have on Earth." The docking procedure began automatically. Mechanical arms reached out to secure the vessel, but as soon as they touched the hull, the metal seemed to welcome them, flowing around the contact points like it was alive. "That's not normal," one of the security officers said. "Nothing about this is normal," Yuna replied. The airlock cycled through its sequence, and everyone in the bay held their breath. Green lights indicated a successful seal, and the inner door began to open. Captain Lee Do-yun stepped through first, looking exactly as he had 15 years ago, not a day older. His uniform was the same, his face was the same, even his hair was the same length. Behind him came Dr. Park Mina, engineer, Kim Woo-bin, and Lieutenant Han Ji-woo. All of them looked exactly as they had the day they left Earth. Admiral Choi, Captain Lee said with a slight bow. Permission to come aboard. Yuna stared at him in shock. Lee Do-yun, you haven't aged a single day. Time works differently where we've been, he replied. We have much to discuss. Dr. Song stepped forward with his scanning equipment. Captain, we need to run some basic medical checks for everyone's safety. Of course, Lee nodded. But Admiral, there are things you need to know immediately. Earth is in danger. What kind of danger, Doctor? Park Mina spoke up. The kind that destroys entire star systems. We've seen it happen. Engineer Kim Woo-bin looked around the docking bay with interest. Your technology has advanced since we left, but not nearly enough for what's coming. Lieutenant Han Ji-woo was studying a handheld device that definitely wasn't standard Earth equipment. We have maybe 2 years before they arrive. 3 if we're lucky. Yuna felt a chill run down her spine. Who's coming? Captain Lee's expression grew serious. We call them the Devourers. They consume everything in their path. Entire civilizations, whole worlds, even the space between stars. They've been moving across the galaxy for thousands of years. And you know this how? Because we've been fighting them, Dr. Park said simply. Or rather learning how to fight them. The beings who taught us called themselves the Architects. Dr. Song's scanner beeped frantically as he ran it over the returned crew members. Admiral, their cellular structure has been altered at the quantum level. They're still human, but they've been changed somehow. Enhanced, Engineer Kim corrected. We had to be, to survive what we experienced and to use the technology we've brought back. What technology? Yuna asked. Captain Lee smiled, but it wasn't entirely a happy expression. Technology that will either save humanity or destroy it. Possibly both. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device that looked like a metallic cube. As everyone watched, the cube began to unfold itself, revealing layers of impossible complexity that seemed to exist in more dimensions than should be possible. This is a basic tool by the standards of where we've been, he said. It can manipulate matter at the subatomic level, create energy from quantum fluctuations, and establish communication across time itself. The cube continued unfolding until it was the size of a basketball, hovering in the air and pulsing with gentle light. But using it requires a level of mental discipline that most species never achieve, Dr. Park added. Use it wrong, and you can accidentally erase yourself from existence. Yuna stared at the floating device. How many of these do you have? Our ship is full of them, Lieutenant Han said. Along with medical technology that can bring the dead back to life, engines that can fold space and time, and weapons that can destroy planets or create new ones. The Architects gave us all of this? Dr. Song asked. Captain Lee shook his head. They taught us how to build it ourselves. Humanity passed their tests, Doctor. We're the first species in over 10,000 years to do so. What tests? Tests designed to push us beyond every possible limit, Engineer Kim replied. Tests that should have killed us 100 times over. But we kept finding ways to survive, to adapt, to overcome problems that had no solutions. The floating device collapsed back into a simple cube and Captain Lee put it away. Admiral, he said, we need to speak with Earth's leaders immediately. The Devourers are coming and we have very little time to prepare. The technology we've brought back can save our world, but only if we can learn to use it properly. And if we can't? Captain Lee looked out through the viewport at the blue marble of Earth hanging in space. Then humanity joins the list of dead civilizations scattered across the galaxy. Admiral Choi Yuna took a deep breath. 15 years ago, she had sent 200 people into the unknown. Now they had returned with the power to save or damn the entire human race. Welcome home, Captain, she said. Let's get to work. 3 days after the Horizon's Edge returned, Admiral Choi Yuna sat in Conference Room Alpha with Earth's top military leaders and scientists. Captain Lee Do-yun stood at the front of the room, a holographic projector showing images that defied everything they thought they knew about the universe. The energy storm hit us without warning, Captain Lee began. One moment we were conducting routine scans near Kepler 442, and the next moment we were falling through what felt like a crack in space itself. The hologram showed the horizon's edge being pulled into a swirling vortex of impossible colors. The ship twisted and stretched as reality bent around it. Our instruments went crazy, Dr. Park Mina added from her seat. Everything we knew about physics stopped working. The ship should have been torn apart, but somehow we held together. Dr. Song Hyunwoo leaned forward in his chair. How long were you in this energy storm? Hours, maybe days, Engineer Kim Woobin replied. Time had no meaning in there. When we finally came out the other side, we found ourselves in a place that shouldn't exist. The hologram changed to show a vast space filled with floating structures that looked like they were made of crystallized light. Geometric shapes the size of moons drifted between stars that burned with colors no human had ever seen. The architects found us within minutes of our arrival, Captain Lee continued. They didn't speak in words. They communicated by placing thoughts directly into our minds. General Hayes, the head of Earth's military forces, spoke up. What did they want? To test us, Lieutenant Han Ji-woo answered. They had been watching humanity for thousands of years, waiting to see if we possessed what they called adaptive resilience. Which means what exactly? Admiral Yuna asked. Dr. Park Mina stood up and walked to the holographic display. They showed us the history of our galaxy. Millions of intelligent species have risen and fallen over the past 100,000 years. Most of them followed predictable patterns. The hologram showed different alien civilizations. Some looked like insects, others like plants or machines. All of them were clearly advanced, with cities that spanned entire planets and ships that could cross between stars. When these species faced problems, they used logic and established methods to solve them, Dr. Park explained. If those methods failed, they would try variations of the same approach. If that didn't work, they would usually give up or destroy themselves. But humans are different, Engineer Kim added. When we face an impossible problem, we don't just think outside the box. We burn the box and build something completely new from the ashes. The hologram changed again, showing the horizon's edge in what looked like a testing facility. The ship was surrounded by massive machines that generated various forms of energy and matter. The architects put us through tests that lasted for decades, Captain Lee said. In the pocket dimension where we were held, time moved differently. While 15 years passed on Earth, we experienced over a century of trials. Dr. Song's eyes widened. A century? But you haven't aged at all. The architects modified our bodies to survive the testing process, Dr. Park explained. They needed to see how we would respond to extreme situations over long periods of time. Lieutenant Han activated a personal device and a smaller hologram appeared showing various test scenarios. They subjected us to radiation levels that should have killed us in minutes. Our ship's hull began to melt, but instead of accepting death, Engineer Kim figured out how to reverse the radiation and use it to strengthen our shields. Impossible, General Hayes muttered. That's what every other species said, Engineer Kim replied with a slight smile. They followed the established laws of physics. We ignored those laws and made our own. The hologram showed another test where the horizon's edge was trapped in a gravitational field so strong that space itself was bending around the ship. Standard procedure would have been to try to escape using maximum engine power, Captain Lee said. When that failed, most species would either give up or be crushed. But Dr. Park had a different idea. Dr. Park nodded. I realized we didn't need to fight the gravity. We needed to convince it to work for us instead of against us. So we modified our engines to create a resonance frequency that made the gravitational field push us away instead of pulling us in. That makes no scientific sense, Dr. Song protested. Exactly, Dr. Park replied. Logic said it was impossible, but we did it anyway. Admiral Yuna studied the faces around the table. How many tests did they put you through? Hundreds, Lieutenant Han answered. Each one designed to be more impossible than the last. They tested our ability to solve problems, to work together, under extreme stress, and to never give up even when death seemed certain. And we passed every single one, Captain Lee said with pride. Not because we were smarter or stronger than other species, but because we were too stubborn to quit. The hologram changed to show what looked like a massive library filled with floating crystals that glowed with inner light. After we proved ourselves, the architects shared their knowledge with us, Engineer Kim explained. Technology that takes advantage of the quantum nature of reality itself. Machines that work by convincing the universe to behave differently. They also shared something else, Dr. Park said quietly. The reason they were testing species in the first place. The room fell silent as the hologram showed a dark region of space where stars were simply missing, not destroyed or collapsed, but completely gone as if they had never existed. The Devourers, Captain Lee said, a force that consumes not just matter and energy, but the very concepts that allow things to exist. They have been moving across the galaxy for eons, erasing entire civilizations from reality. How many worlds have they destroyed? General Hayes asked. Millions, Lieutenant Han replied. Entire star systems have been wiped from existence. The architects themselves were destroyed centuries ago. Only their consciousness remains, hidden in pocket dimensions like the one where we were tested. Doctor, Song stared at the image of empty space. Why haven't they reached Earth before now? Because they move slowly and deliberately, Dr. Park explained. They take time to completely consume each civilization, learning from their technology and knowledge before moving on to the next target. But they're accelerating, Engineer Kim added grimly. Our arrival in the architect's dimension somehow alerted the Devourers to our existence. They know about Earth now and they're coming. Admiral Yuna felt a chill run through her. How long do we have? 2 years, maybe 3, Captain Lee answered. The architects chose us because humanity has something no other species possessed. The ability to find solutions that shouldn't work, to succeed when logic says failure is certain. They gave us their technology not as a gift, but as weapons, Dr. Park said. Tools designed to fight an enemy that has never been defeated. General Hayes leaned back in his chair. What makes you think we can succeed where millions of other civilizations have failed? Captain Lee smiled, and for the first time since returning, he looked truly confident. Because every other species tried to fight the Devourers using logic and established tactics. They built bigger weapons, stronger shields, and faster ships. All of them failed because they were playing by rules that the Devourers understand perfectly. But humans don't follow rules, Engineer Kim added. We break them, ignore them, or rewrite them entirely. The Devourers have never faced a species like us. They consume civilizations that make sense, Dr. Park said. But humanity has never made sense. We survive by being unpredictable, chaotic, and completely unreasonable. Lieutenant Han nodded. The architects told us that our greatest weakness is also our greatest strength. We're the only species they've ever encountered that can look at an impossible situation and say, hold my beer and watch this. Admiral Yuna looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leaders. Some looked terrified, others looked determined. All of them were beginning to understand the magnitude of what was coming. Show us the technology, she said finally. Show us how to fight the impossible. Captain Lee nodded and activated his personal device. Prepare yourselves. What you're about to see will change everything you thought you knew about what's possible. The hologram flickered and changed, showing blueprints for machines that seemed to exist in dimensions human eyes couldn't fully process. But they were beautiful, elegant, and completely alien to anything Earth had ever created. Welcome to the future of warfare, Captain Lee said, where the only rule is that there are no rules. 1 week after the briefing, Dr. Song Hyunwoo stood in the largest laboratory on Earth Defense Station Alpha, staring at pieces of technology that made his brain hurt just to look at them. The crew of the Horizon's Edge had agreed to share their advanced equipment, but understanding it was proving to be nearly impossible. This hull fragment shouldn't exist, Dr. Song muttered, running his scanner over a piece of metal that seemed to shift between solid and liquid states. According to our instruments, it's simultaneously made of iron, carbon, and something that doesn't appear on any periodic table. Engineer Kim Woo-bin walked over with a patient smile. That's because it exists in multiple dimensions at the same time. The architects taught us how to create matter that borrows properties from parallel realities. That's scientifically impossible. So was flying until we figured out how to do it, Kim replied. The trick is not to think about what should be possible. Think about what would be useful, then figure out how to make it real. Dr. Song picked up the fragment with specialized tools. It felt warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with a heartbeat-like rhythm. What does it do? Everything, Kim answered simply. It can become harder than diamond when struck, flow like water when we need it to move, conduct electricity better than copper, or become completely transparent. The hull of our ship can repair itself, camouflage against any background or phase, through solid objects. Across the laboratory, Dr. Park Meena was demonstrating medical technology to a team of Earth's best doctors. She held a device that looked like a crystal wand, glowing with soft blue light. This medical scanner can see inside a patient's body at the quantum level, she explained. It doesn't just show us what's wrong. It shows us what could be wrong in alternate realities and what the patient would look like if they were perfectly healthy. Dr. Martinez, Earth's leading surgeon, shook her head in disbelief. You're saying this device can see parallel universes? Not exactly, Dr. Park replied. It accesses information from quantum possibilities. Every particle in your body exists in a state of quantum superposition until observed. This scanner observes all possible states simultaneously. She pointed the device at Dr. Martinez and activated it. A holographic display appeared, showing not just the doctor's current physical condition, but dozens of slightly different versions of her. This version shows you if you had never broken your wrist as a child, Dr. Park explained, pointing to one of the images. This one shows what you would look like if you had perfect vision. And this one shows your body as it would be if the cancer cells we detected were completely eliminated. Dr. Martinez stared at the display in shock. You detected cancer? My last physical showed nothing. The cells are still in quantum superposition, Dr. Park said gently. They haven't decided yet whether to become cancerous or not, but we can encourage them to choose the healthy path. She made an adjustment to the device, and Dr. Martinez felt a warm, tingling sensation throughout her body. There, Dr. Park said. We've convinced those cells to follow the reality where they remain healthy. The cancer that might have been will never exist. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Han Jiwoo was working with Earth's communication specialists in an adjacent room. The equipment spread across multiple tables looked more like art than technology, with flowing curves and surfaces that seemed to bend light around them. Standard radio waves travel at the speed of light, Han explained to the fascinated technicians. This communication system uses quantum entanglement to send messages instantaneously across any distance. That part we understand, said Communications Officer Roberts. We've been working on quantum communication for years, but this other equipment makes no sense. Han picked up a device that looked like a metallic flower with petals that moved on their own. This allows us to send messages backward in time. Not far, usually just a few hours, but enough to warn ourselves about incoming dangers. Time travel is impossible, Roberts protested. Linear time travel is impossible, Han corrected. But quantum time loops are different. We're not changing the past. We're creating a causal loop where the effect becomes its own cause. He activated the device and a soft chiming sound filled the room. A moment later, Han's own voice came from the speakers, saying words he hadn't spoken yet. Warning. Dr. Roberts is about to spill coffee on the main console in 30 seconds. Everyone turned to look at Roberts, who was indeed reaching for his coffee cup. He froze, staring at the cup in his hand. I wasn't going to spill anything, he said. You are now, Han replied with a grin. The warning created the very situation it was warning about. That's how quantum time loops work. The message exists because it was sent, and it was sent because the message existed. Roberts carefully set his coffee down without taking a sip. Back in the main laboratory, Admiral Choi Yuna arrived to observe the demonstrations. Captain Lee Do-yun met her at the entrance, his expression serious. Admiral, we need to discuss the most important technology we brought back, he said. The weapons systems. He led her to a secured section of the laboratory where a single device sat on a pedestal. It looked deceptively simple, like a black sphere the size of a basketball. This is a reality disruptor, Captain Lee explained, It can erase objects from existence by convincing the universe that they were never there in the first place. Admiral Yuna stared at the innocent-looking sphere. How does it work? It creates a field of quantum uncertainty around the target, Lee replied. Within that field, the target's existence becomes a probability rather than a certainty. The device then collapses the probability wave in favor of non-existence. In simple terms, it makes things disappear by making the universe forget they ever existed. Yuna felt a chill run down her spine. What's the range? That depends on how much power we feed into it, Lee answered. With our ship's power system, we could erase everything within a sphere 50 kilometers across. With the right modifications, we could target individual molecules or entire planets. And this is what you plan to use against the Devourers? Captain. Lee shook his head. This is one of the smaller weapons. The Devourers are resistant to simple reality manipulation. They exist partially outside normal space-time, which makes them harder to erase. He walked to another pedestal, holding what looked like a collection of floating geometric shapes that rotated around each other in complex patterns. This is a causality bomb, he continued. It doesn't destroy the target. It destroys the chain of events that led to the target's creation. Admiral Yuna tried to process what she was hearing. You're talking about changing history. Not changing it, Lee corrected. We're creating a localized paradox that prevents the target from ever having existed in the first place. The bomb finds the most critical moment in the target's history and ensures that moment never happens. What if that creates a paradox that destroys everything? That's the beauty of it, Lee replied with a grim smile. The device is smart enough to only target things that can be safely removed from the timeline. It won't destroy anything that would cause a universe-ending paradox. Dr. Song walked over, having overheard the conversation. Captain, these weapons are incredibly dangerous. One mistake could destroy our solar system, Lee finished. We know. That's why the architects spent decades teaching us mental discipline and quantum awareness. These weapons respond to thought and intention as much as they do to physical controls. He gestured to the floating shapes of the causality bomb. If the operator isn't mentally prepared, if they have doubts or fears, the weapon will sense that and refuse to function. It requires absolute certainty and complete understanding of the consequences. Admiral Yuna watched the geometric shapes rotating in their endless dance. How do we train people to use these things? Very carefully, Dr. Park said, joining the group. We start with meditation and quantum perception exercises. The operator must learn to see reality as it truly is, not as our limited senses tell us it should be. Engineer Kim nodded in agreement. The hardest part is unlearning everything we think we know about how the universe works. These technologies require us to think in ways that feel completely wrong to normal human minds. How long does the training take? Yuna asked. For basic operation? 6 months minimum, Captain Lee answered. For advanced techniques? Years. And not everyone can do it. The human mind has to be flexible enough to accept paradoxes and contradictions as normal. Lieutenant Han walked over carrying a device that looked like a helmet made of crystallized light. This helps with the training process. It allows direct interface between human consciousness and quantum reality. Is it safe? Dr. Song asked. Safer than trying to learn without it, Han replied. But there are risks. Some people can't handle the expanded awareness. Their minds shut down trying to process information from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Admiral Yuna looked around at all the impossible technology surrounding her. Weapons that could erase planets from existence, medical devices that could prevent diseases that hadn't happened yet, and communication systems that could send messages through time itself. How many of Earth's people can learn to use this technology? She asked. Captain Lee considered the question carefully. Maybe 1 person in 1,000 has the right combination of mental flexible. 8 months had passed since the Horizon's Edge returned, and Admiral Choi Yuna stood in the war room watching displays that showed the most ambitious military project in human history. Training centers had been built on every continent, space. Stations were being converted into weapons platforms, and Earth's best minds were working around the clock to understand architect technology. But the progress was not fast enough. "We've lost another test pilot," General Hayes reported grimly. "That makes 12 this month." Lieutenant Chen was attempting to interface with the quantum fighter when his mind simply shut down. "The doctors say he's alive, but his consciousness is scattered across multiple dimensions." Captain Li Doyun looked up from the tactical display. He was studying. "I warned you that the training would be dangerous. The quantum interface requires a level of mental flexibility that most humans don't possess." "How many qualified pilots do we have now?" Admiral Yuna asked. 43, replied Dr. Park Mina. "Out of over 10,000 candidates we've tested, the success rate is lower than we hoped." Engineer Kim Wubin shook his head as he reviewed the latest training reports. "The problem isn't ability, it's fear. When people see reality shifting around them, when they realize that their thoughts can literally reshape the universe, most minds rebel against the experience." "Can you blame them?" Dr. Song Hyunwoo said from his position at the science station. "We're asking humans to abandon everything they know about how the world works, to accept that logic is optional and that impossibility is just another word for haven't tried hard enough yet." Lieutenant Han Jiwoo was monitoring long-range sensors when every alarm in the room suddenly began screaming. "Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the solar system. Multiple contacts moving fast." Everyone rushed to the main display as Han transferred the sensor data. What they saw made the blood freeze in their veins. Dozens of objects the size of small moons were entering the outer system, their hulls so dark they seemed to absorb light itself. "That's impossible," General Hayes whispered. "Our estimates said we had at least 10 more months." Captain Lee studied the readings with growing alarm. "The Devourers are ahead of schedule. They must have found a way to move faster than the architects predicted." "How long until they reach Earth?" Admiral Yuna demanded. "At their current speed, 6 weeks, Han calculated. But they're still accelerating." Dr. Park was running calculations on her personal device. "This changes everything. We don't have enough trained personnel. Our quantum weapons are still in prototype stage. Most of our defense platforms aren't even finished." The war room fell silent as everyone processed the magnitude of their situation. They had been preparing for a war that was supposed to start in 10 months, not 6 weeks. "Options," Admiral Yuna said firmly. "We could evacuate," suggested General Hayes. "Send colony ships to distant star systems, hope some humans survive to rebuild elsewhere. The Devourers would track us down eventually," Captain Lee replied. "They don't just destroy civilizations. They hunt them across the galaxy until every last trace is eliminated. Then we fight with what we have," Yuna decided. "Even if we're not ready." "Admiral, with respect, 43 pilots and a handful of prototype weapons won't stop an invasion force that destroyed the architect's civilization," Dr. Song pointed out. Engineer Kim was staring at the tactical display with a strange expression. "Unless we don't fight them the way they expect to, be fought," explain. "Every civilization the Devourers have faced has tried to meet them in conventional battle," Kim said. "Ships against ships, weapons against weapons. But what if we don't give them a conventional battle?" Dr. Park caught on to his thinking. "The architect technology doesn't just allow us to build better weapons, it allows us to change the rules of combat entirely." "What are you suggesting?" Admiral Yuna asked. Captain Lee was studying the enemy formations with new interest. "We make the entire solar system into a trap. Not a military trap, but a reality trap." He activated the holographic projector, showing a 3-dimensional map of the solar system. "The Devourers expect us to meet them in space with fleets and armies. Instead, we use quantum entanglement to link every planet, moon, and space station into a single defensive network." "How does that help us?" General Hayes asked. "Because we turn the entire system into a weapon," Lieutenant Han explained, beginning to understand the plan. "We use the reality disruptors to create pockets of altered space-time throughout the solar system. When the Devourers enter, they won't be fighting us in normal space anymore." Dr. Song looked confused. "I don't understand." Dr. Park smiled for the first time in months. We're going to change the laws of physics in local space. Make it so that the Devourer's technology doesn't work the way it's supposed to. The architects told us that the Devourers are vulnerable to chaos and unpredictability, Engineer Kim added. So we're going to give them the most chaotic, unpredictable battlefield in galactic history. Admiral Yuna studied the holographic display. How long would it take to set up this reality trap? With every available ship and station working together, maybe 4 weeks, Captain Lee estimated, but it would require us to risk everything. If the plan fails, we won't have any conventional defenses left. And our people, the ones who can't use the quantum technology, they become part of the trap, Dr. Park said. We link their minds to the quantum network. Even if they can't operate the advanced weapons, they can contribute their thoughts and emotions to the reality field. You're talking about turning every human being into a weapon component, General Hayes said with alarm. Not a weapon, Captain, Lee corrected. A reality anchor. Human consciousness is naturally chaotic and unpredictable. If we can link enough minds together, we can create a field of quantum uncertainty that the Devourers have never encountered before. Lieutenant Han was running simulations on his console. The mathematics actually work. If we can get even half of Earth's population connected to the network, the reality distortion would be strong enough to affect objects the size of the Devourer ships. What would happen to the people connected to this network? Dr. Song asked. Quietly, the room fell silent. Finally, Dr. Park answered, We don't know. The architects never attempted anything on this scale. The mental strain could be enormous. Some people might not survive the connection, Engineer Kim admitted. But if we don't try, no one survives at all. Admiral Yuna looked around the room, at Earth's defenders. Military officers who had trained their entire lives for conventional warfare. Scientists who had devoted their careers to understanding the universe through logic and reason. All of them now faced with a plan that abandoned everything they had ever known about how battles were fought. There's something else, Captain Lee said reluctantly. This plan requires someone to coordinate the entire network, someone who can handle the mental strain of connecting millions of human minds to quantum reality. Who? It has to be one of us, someone from the Horizon's Edge crew. We're the only ones who have been trained to handle that level of quantum awareness. And what happens to whoever volunteers? Captain Lee met her eyes directly. They would need to merge their consciousness with the network permanently. They would become the focal point for the entire reality field, experiencing the thoughts and emotions of every connected human simultaneously. They would lose their individual identity, Dr. Park added softly. Become something more than human, but also something less. The war room was quiet except for the steady beeping of sensors tracking the approaching Devourer fleet. Outside the windows, Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, home to 8 billion people who had no idea that their entire existence was about to be gambled on a plan that defied every law of physics and common sense. I'll do it, Captain Lee said simply. Lee, no, Dr. Park protested. We don't know if you can survive the process. Someone has to, he replied. And I'm the most experienced with quantum consciousness integration. Admiral Yuna studied the man, who had already sacrificed 15 years of his life to save humanity. Now he was volunteering to sacrifice his very identity. There might be another way, she said slowly. What? We don't just connect human minds to the network. We connect human souls, our hopes, dreams, fears, and stubbornness, everything that makes us human, good and bad. Engineer Kim's eyes widened. You want to weaponize human nature itself. The Devourers consume logical civilizations, Yuna said. But humans have never been logical. We're emotional, irrational, and completely impossible to predict. If we can amplify those traits through quantum technology, we become something the Devourers have never faced before, Captain Lee finished. Not just a military force, but a force of pure, concentrated humanity. Lieutenant Han looked up from his sensors. Admiral, the Devourer fleet is changing course. They're heading directly for Earth now. How long? 5 weeks, maybe less. Admiral Yuna took a deep breath. Then, we better get started. Signal all stations, all ships, all governments. Tell them we're about to attempt something that has never been tried before in the history of the galaxy." "What do we tell them we're going to do?" General Hayes asked. Una smiled grimly. "We're going to be human, loudly, proudly, and so intensely that the universe itself takes notice." Outside the station, Earth Conti, the Devourers arrived like a tide of absolute darkness. Admiral Choi Yuna watched from the command center as the enemy fleet entered Earth's solar system, their ships so massive they blocked out entire star fields. Each vessel looked like a geometric nightmare, constantly shifting between shapes that hurt to look at directly. "They're not following any known physics," Dr. Song Hyun-woo reported, his voice tight with fear. "Our sensors can't get stable readings. It's like they exist in several dimensions at once." Captain Lee Do-yoon stood at the center of the quantum network interface, cables of crystallized light connecting his mind to every human consciousness on Earth. His eyes glowed with an inner fire as 8 billion minds touched his thoughts. "Can feel them," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't have been possible. "The Devourers aren't just destroying matter, they're erasing the concept of existence itself." The first wave of Earth's conventional fleet met the enemy. At Jupiter's orbit, Admiral Yuna watched in horror as entire battleships simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but edited out of reality as if they had never been built. "Conventional weapons are useless," General Hayes reported. "Every ship that gets within 1,000 kilometers just disappears. Then it's time to stop being conventional," Engineer Kim Woo-bin said from his position at the reality manipulation controls. The plan they had spent 5 weeks preparing began to unfold. Across the solar system, quantum field generators came online, each one operated by humans who had learned to think in impossible ways. The very fabric of space-time began to shift and flow like liquid. Dr. Park Mina activated the first phase of their defense. Reality anchors are in position, beginning quantum consciousness integration. Suddenly, Captain Lee's awareness exploded, outward. He could feel every human mind in the solar system connecting to the network. A child in Tokyo thinking about her pet cat. A farmer in Iowa worried about his crops. An artist in Paris dreaming of colors that didn't exist. A grandmother in Cairo telling stories to her grandchildren. All of them became part of something larger, the Ya. "Network is stable," Lieutenant Han Ji-woo reported. 8 billion minds linked and holding. The Devourers seemed to sense that something was wrong. Their advance slowed as they encountered pockets of space where their reality-erasing weapons simply stopped working. In some areas, the laws of physics had been replaced by human imagination. One Devourer ship tried to erase a defense platform near Mars, but instead of disappearing, the platform transformed into a giant flower that began singing opera. Another ship found itself surrounded by butterflies made of pure mathematics that refused to be destroyed, because a 5-year-old girl in Mumbai believed very strongly that butterflies were too pretty to hurt. "It's working," Dr. Song said in amazement. "They can't process what they're encountering." But the Devourers adapted quickly. They began to merge together, forming larger and more complex shapes. Their reality-erasing fields grew stronger, pushing through the quantum chaos that humanity had created. "They're learning," Captain Lee warned, his consciousness stretched across the entire network. "We need to escalate." Engineer Kim activated the second phase, engaging full reality distortion. All quantum weapons are now live. What happened next had never been attempted in the history of the galaxy. Human creativity, emotion, and pure, stubborn determination were amplified through technology that operated on the quantum level. The solar system became a canvas for 8 billion human minds working together. A Devourer ship found itself in a region of space where gravity worked backward, pushing objects away instead of pulling them together. This happened because a physics student in Berlin had always thought gravity was unfair and wanted to see what would happen if it worked the other way. Another ship encountered an area where time moved in spirals instead of straight lines. Every second, the ship experienced its past, present, and future simultaneously. This was the result of a poet in Sao Paulo who had written about time as a dance rather than a march. The largest Devourer vessel, a structure the size of Earth's moon, tried to erase the planet directly, but it found itself facing something unprecedented. Earth had been wrapped in a field of pure human consciousness, protected by the combined will of every person who had ever called it home. The planet didn't just resist the erasure, it fought back. "Impossible," came a voice that spoke directly into everyone's mind. It was the first time the Devourers had ever communicated. "You should not exist. You defy all logical patterns." Captain Lee, speaking for all of humanity, replied with 8 billion voices speaking as one. "We've never been logical. We're human." The battle reached its climax when the Devourers attempted their ultimate weapon, a device that could erase entire star systems by removing them from the timeline itself. But when they activated it, something wonderful and terrible happened. Instead of erasing the solar system, the weapon was overwhelmed by human possibility. Every human dream, every story ever told, every impossible thing that people had ever imagined became real in that moment. The space around Earth filled with dragons that breathed starlight, cities that floated on music, and oceans of liquid time. The Devourers, beings of pure logic and consumption, could not process a reality where anything was possible simply because someone believed it should be. "We cannot consume chaos," the Devourer voice admitted, and for the first time in millions of years it sounded afraid. "We cannot understand a species that makes no sense." Dr. Park Mina watched her instruments in wonder. "They're retreating. The entire fleet is pulling back." But humanity wasn't finished. Captain Lee, still connected to every human mind, made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. "We're not just going to survive," he announced. "We're going to follow them." Using the quantum network, human consciousness began to spread beyond the solar system, not as conquerors but as a force of pure possibility. Everywhere the network touched, the rigid laws that the Devourers used to consume reality began to soften and bend. Other civilizations that had been hiding from the Devourers for millennia began to receive a strange message. It came in the form of human laughter, human music, and human stories. It told them that a species had been found that could fight the impossible and win. On dead worlds where the Devourers had erased entire populations, flowers began to grow. They shouldn't have been able to exist in the barren soil, but a gardener in Kenya had imagined them there, and the quantum network made imagination real. The Devourer fleet, faced with an enemy they could not understand or defeat, did something they had never done before. They fled, not just from Earth but from that entire region of the galaxy, seeking areas where logic still ruled and chaos could not follow. Admiral Yuna stood in the command center, watching long-range sensors track the retreating enemy. Around her, the crew of the Horizon's Edge was slowly disconnecting from the quantum network, their faces showing the exhaustion of having their consciousness spread across impossible distances. "Is it over?" she asked. Captain Lee, finally returning to his individual self, smiled with the memory of 8 billion other smiles. "For now. But something bigger has started." Dr. Park was studying readings from across the galaxy. "The quantum network is still active. Other species are beginning to connect to it. They want to learn how to be human." "How do you teach someone to be human?" Dr. Song wondered. Engineer Kim laughed, a sound that somehow contained echoes of every human laugh that had ever existed. "You don't teach it, you just start being impossible and see who's brave enough to join you." Lieutenant Han was receiving messages from dozens of star systems. "Admiral, we're getting communication requests from civilizations we've never heard of. They all want the same thing." "Which is?" "They want to know how to fight logic with laughter, how to defeat despair with stubbornness, how to make the impossible possible just because it would be cool if it worked." Admiral Yuna looked out at the stars, no longer seeing them as distant points of light but as neighbors waiting to be introduced to the wonderful chaos of human nature. "Signal them all back," she ordered. "Tell them welcome to the neighborhood, and warn them that hanging out with humans means giving up on the idea that the universe has to make sense." Captain Lee walked to the viewport, still feeling the faint connection to every human consciousness in the solar system. Earth hung before them, blue and beautiful and utterly impossible. A world where 8 billion individual minds had chosen to become something greater while never losing what made them unique. What happens now? Admiral Yuna asked. Now we teach the galaxy that the best way to face the impossible is with a species crazy enough to make the impossible give up and go home, Captain Lee replied. And across the stars, on worlds both living and dead, the message of humanity began to spread. Not through conquest or force, but through the simple, revolutionary idea that anything was possible if you were stubborn enough to keep trying, creative enough to find new solutions, and human enough to laugh in the face of certain defeat. The age of logic-based civilizations was ending. The age of humanity had begun,